No interaction required. I can detect it, and I can pretty much rip it apart with very little effort. So I'm going to go up and rescan this guy and see if it will repro. Apologies ahead of time if it doesn't. But from my experience with this particular exploit kit, is it's very picky about who it will actually exploit. So it just exploited me. So my posit is it's not going to do it again because that's too obvious. It'll be, I'm a researcher. I've already exploited that IP. I don't need to exploit it again. So put that link in. I'm going to just say don't crawl. Just give me the first one. I'm going to up the priority in case there's anything else running. I don't really care about that. And I want to keep the logs even though there may not be a detection. So let's see if it actually runs on one of these. Now, it looks like another one of the 96 VMs got it. So we sit here for 30 seconds or so. So it's telling me the crawl's in progress, the behavioral scan is in progress. You can see my UI skills there. It doesn't even update. Just have to hit refresh. And no behavioral, no heuristic. The only thing that's the same is reputation, and I see Google over there. So what happened? The first time I did it, it stayed on site and exploited me. The second time I did it, I look at the raw HTTP traffic. Well, I went there. I said, give me the same URL, index.php on scotty.net, and it just gave me a 302 and punted me off to Google. Clever. If you're trying to evade detection, it's a pretty easy way of doing it. Just keep a small list of IPs you've infected and don't keep infecting them. Pretty brain dead. I think that's all I really wanted to cover. Probably a little bit early. Thank you very much. And special shout out to Richie, who's in the audience, who helped me co-author, and Brian, who's in my team in Seattle. Couldn't have done this without them. And we'll open this up to Q&A. All of the above. So at first, this is pro bono. We want to give back to the community. We want to help out. That's the starting point. The next logical step there is actually running these scans for enterprises as part of a protection type suite. I can't give you the marketing spiel. I'm just a software architect. But it is generally give back to the community, build up knowledge in the malware space, and help. And if you really want to know, the CEO is right there, so just hunt him down later.
Yeah, I can give you the answer, the very straightforward answer. We sincerely believe today that malware is becoming so sophisticated that one company cannot do it all. That's what we call the effort. So what Rami is also building, starting to build the community portal, whereby we can put that malware detection tool and other. With the scalability that we're doing here, we could literally today scan every website on the platform. So we do currently today about 5 million URLs. I didn't say today.
I need a lot more hardware budget.
Anyway, he's a rich guy, so he can do it. So I think we do how much? 5 million URLs?
We do about 3 to 5 million, depending on the scale points. And it's pretty much scales linearly, add another virtual machine, get another million a day.
So the next step, we're going to be the research portal and also share information, etc. So essentially, so we could try to detect, obviously, malware, any kind of malware, and then analyze it, and of course, investigate the community.
It's also a gold mine of exploitability data. If we're scanning enough, we can see how particular exploits are trending. We can help people prioritize patching. There's a lot of really interesting things you can do. We can make recommendations on browser types when we start implementing new browsers, on what plugins you should avoid. There's a lot of happy congruences that occur when you have a large database to pull from. There's a lot of BI that you can do that has great value. And Philippe's kind of alluded to that as well.
I'm curious how you keep your environment code.
Both. So the very first step is anything that violates the behavioral profile, we behavioral block. Behavioral blocking was really big about 5 years ago. The antivirus vendors were like, oh, we're just going to implement behavioral blocking, and lo and behold, it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because you don't know what the user's doing. In this particular case, there is no user. It's all automated. We know exactly what it's doing. Therefore, behavioral blocking is not only possible, it's actually really quite easy. And anytime we see anything that's going to affect the state of the machine or pollute one scan to the next, we block that. And also, just to be safe, we reboot the virtual machine after a certain period, or if we get a certain number of detections or a certain number of errors. So it's both. We're paranoid. We don't want to pollute results, but at the same time, we don't want to incur the hit of starting and stopping a virtual machine for every web page we scan. It just doesn't scale that way.
Have you ever done your program with a thin hypervisor such as Sandbox IE?
We have not. I'm not sure what the implications are there. I haven't researched it. But one of the things that I'm trying to keep is the purity of the experience. I don't want it to be easy to detect what we're doing. I'm sure there are ways, but I want to make that as hard as possible. And I don't want to get into the situation where I am making assumptions about the attack vector. There are other ways you can do this. You can emulate JavaScript. You can emulate the browser. You can do all kinds of stuff. But the further you deviate from the raw actual binary that people are running, the more of a chance that you're going to miss something, or you're not going to account for an attack vector that's going to happen 5 years from now, or 2 months from now, or tomorrow. Please.
I'm curious, on the behavioral side, your features appear to be purely API calls. So that is the rules that you use to determine up-to-date, incorrect behavior state.
Predominantly. Predominantly. It's not purely correct, but that is the predominant answer, yes.
Okay. And then they seem to be Boolean decisions, right? So that is, the browser should never call it, invoke the browser.
Some of them are a little more complicated than that, but you basically hit the theory of it. It is a Boolean operation. There are certain cases where it's okay under this scenario to touch this file when you're doing this, but only if this plugin is loaded. And
I guess that was my question is, Sam, do you envision that for the behavioral side, I guess you pointed out that's why you need the heuristics mode, but it seems like if you were using purely behavioral, you are going to get a lot of false positives.
No, not false positives, the other way around. With purely behavioral, you're going to get a lot of false negatives. Where that becomes a problem is when you add ActiveX controls or more controls, the interactions get more complicated. But what it really boils down to is a yes or no answer. Is this okay? Is this something is this something that violates the behavioral profile? Is this something the browser should be doing without the user? When you strip away all the weird edge cases and the caveats, that's what it really boils down to. It's a Boolean operation. Yes, this is okay. No, it's not. The more plugins, the more features, the more things you throw in, the more complex the behavioral profiles become. But they always boil down to yes or no.
So then you envision the need to make, I guess, the concept of maintenance of the profile. I mean, almost like you have to keep generating signatures. Do you envision having to keep
No.
updating the profile?
So the behavioral profile only has to be updated when you update the browser, when you update the ActiveX objects that it's using, or you add more. So the only time the behavioral profile ever changes is when your base configuration changes. That's what's so appealing about this technique. I don't have to add new signatures. I don't have to add new behaviors. Assuming that I understand the browser, assuming I understand the plugins on that browser, the behavioral profile is the behavioral profile, and it's a Boolean operation. Anytime I change anything, if I update the operating system, if I update the browser, if I update a plugin, if I change the username of the person logged in, if I do anything to change the VM state, then I have to update my behavioral profile. But that's the only case. And we don't do that. Yes, there is. So it's a configurable timeout, and it's also predicated upon when it's done loading. And there's some other things that we do that try to make it a little more intelligent. I don't want to give you a set time because Next thing you know, instead of 200 milliseconds, it'll be whatever that set time times 2, and all the scripts will be there. I don't imagine I'm that widely popular, but you know, if then the exploit isn't going to get anywhere. I mean, no one's going to sit on a web page for 2 minutes consistently. But you're right, it would defeat us at that point. Well, actually, no, let me take that back. We can detect the sleep. At that point, we can start being more intelligent. Now, I didn't have that as a canned answer, it just occurred to me. If we hook the actual sleep, eventually the script interpreter is going to run and hit the sleep, at which point we're going to say, hey, the script is sleeping, waiting for something. Let's stick around, or let's fake it out and trigger it anyway.
But there's too much sleep.
I don't agree. Like, all you do is hook the sleep function and look for the max value. Once you have the max value, extend your scan to that duration. And if it gets unreasonable, then you're right, then it becomes problematic.
Because recent private downloads are very ridiculous about the way that they interpret themselves. For example, I'll mouse move.
Yep. Yep.
So they don't
This would not trigger. That's correct. But again, this is the first version. The next version starts clicking on links. Next version starts interacting with text boxes, checking things, unchecking things. This isn't a panacea. This isn't going to solve every single drive-by scenario. But one thing to keep in mind is malware authors, the more obscure they get about their selective serving, the less payoff they're going to get on infecting pages. The drive-by download is so popular because it's the most efficient method of getting your stuff out there. If the user has to click on a particular button or perform some voodoo or type a secret code into the web page, then the rate of distribution will be negatively impacted quite a bit. And we can take steps to mitigate that, or mitigate some of the things that they would check for, like moving the mouse, as you mentioned. Rollover was a big one for a while. The on-clicks are another one. But generally, malware authors want it to be automated. As soon as you render the page, we want to exploit you. So while you bring up a very valid point, I don't think it's by any means a showstopper, and it's something that we'll continue to iterate on. Exploits and exploit detection is always a game of cat and mouse. There's no, this gets everything from now and forever. No one's going to figure out a way to circumvent it. It doesn't work like that. It is a cat and mouse game. We'll get better, they'll get smarter, and the cycle will continue.
You're collecting all this malware from these sites that are actually dropping EXEs on your system. You're then taking those EXEs, dropping them onto like a malware watching farm so you can further watch for this for URLs and pinging out to.
So I have an unfinished feature. Some of you saw the antivirus column. That's all in the works. We're going to actually run all the binaries through an antivirus engine. We're going to compute, we're going to compute the SHA-1 hashes, and we're going to do fuzzy matching and all of that other good stuff, and maintain libraries of different malware where it's being served, try to match it back to the distribution point. This is all that wonderful BI stuff that I was talking about. It's not there yet. I didn't want to talk about it because I'd be talking and not showing, and I don't like to do that. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a very valid weakness. What comes down is an engineering decision, a trade-off. Do I want to implement mouse overs or extra functions, or do I want to instrument Firefox? If we start seeing trends or we start seeing indications that Firefox becomes a viable distribution vector for malware, then the first thing we're going to do is take all of these approaches, all these concepts, and we're going to probably be able to whip out a behavioral profile for Firefox in a relatively short amount of time. Instrument WebKit with a hell of a lot more ease than instrumenting Trident, because I can actually read the source code. And then we do the same thing with Chromium and so on and so forth. It's a very valid point. The combination of OS and browser determines whether or not the exploit's going to run. So yes, we definitely miss out, and we'd like to go there, but that's future work. Mm-hmm.
So you could probably use that as well and target that to get up to a certain level of detection. And then
the other problem is it becomes computationally expensive. Right now I render the page once, and I can replay that render anytime I want.